All right, Tanya Summary Shiur, week 32, Kanai Nahara, chapters 9 through 11 and a half. So, without any further ado, let's just jump right into it. In chapter 8, which is where we're coming from, the Alter Rebbe was discussing how for us lowly physical beings, we have different tiers of what goes on inside of ourselves, and we have understanding, wisdom, and we have emotions, and we have thoughts, and all of these things. And the Alter Rebbe describes how in this tier system, the highest tier is Chachma. Chachma, wisdom, is at the top of everything. Wisdom, what we know, influences everything else beneath it. In chapter 9, the Alter Rebbe starts off by saying that this is not the case with Hashem. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for him, Chachma is literally like the lowest thing that he does. It's considered as though it's like physical action. When a person does an action, that is the final culmination of everything that took place internally. Let's say they think they want to make a peanut butter sandwich, and then they feel they want a peanut butter sandwich, and then ultimately they end up making a peanut butter sandwich, and the final step of that whole emotional and intellectual culmination was that they ended up eating the sandwich. As far as Hashem is concerned, the Chachma, what we would consider to be the highest and the peak, is just as removed from Hashem as action. The Alter Rebbe really elaborates on this point a lot, and one, I think, essential mashal that he gives is to explain why the idea of Chachma, to say that Hashem is very wide and that somehow implies something about his essence. He describes it as saying, for example, that you would ask about a certain idea, what color is it? 2 plus 2 equals 4. Is that purple or red? What would you say? So you would laugh at the person. You would say, the idea of 2 plus 2 equals 4 is not shaykh to the concept of color. And in the same way, Hashem isn't shaykh to anything that he does, really, in this lowly and removed way. He's not shaykh to doing things, and he's not shaykh to chachma. He's not shaykh to anything. These are all impositions which he imposed upon himself, and we understand and we acknowledge that Hashem can do these things. The idea of how you have this divide that, Hashem, he did it, and at the same time, he's not shaykh to it, this is something that we can't properly grasp in our minds, and yet we need to believe it. And the Alter Rebbe says this is the concept of emunah that we need to have in Hashem, that even though he created everything and we understand that he created everything, we're able to make that connection. We say this is a thing that was created by Hashem, but at the same time we need to be able to appreciate that we can't properly understand the full extent of the relationship of how you went from having Hashem, which is completely not shaykh to any of these things, to ultimately having all of the levels that we have down here. But this concept helps us to understand that as far as Hashem is concerned, Chachma, wisdom, or whatever attribute we might be attributing to Hashem, is all very, very far removed from him. And they're all, in a sense, equally removed from him together. Almost like he would say that 10 and 1, compared to infinity, they're both equally non-infinity. So that concludes chapter 9 in a very big nutshell. The Alter Rebbe literally says in that chapter, we don't have any work in concealed things after going through not so many concealed things, but going through a lot of elaboration. But ultimately, that is the gist of it, that even though there's a lot of Kabbalistic ideas to be wrought in this discussion, but this is the gist of it, that Hashem to Chachma is just like Hashem to Asiyah. Hashem isn't shaykh to Chachma and Asiyah, even though he does influence everything in the world. He created the world and everything in it, and everything is really a part of him, which is another very essential point, that everything is part of Hashem, everything is from Hashem. And these points, we need to fill in the gaps with our emunah. So in chapter 10, the Alter Rebbe says, all right, now that I've brought you to this point where I said everything is equally like nothing to Hashem, and Hashem is removed, and we believe that with emunah pshota, fine, very good. Now we need to understand, if they're really also removed from Hashem, then what's the difference? How do we say that there's different spheres or different medias? We should all say there's just one lump. Hashem made the world, and it's all equally nothing to him. And that's that, and he made the world, and there's no difference. Why are we emphasizing there's Chachma and there's Chesed? What difference does it make? So the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem puts things into these terms, not for his sake, because for him it's not like, he has a good idea, and then he implements the idea with Chesed or anything like that. For us, we perceive the difference. This is how we function. The Torah, the famous line is that Torah talks the way that people do, so that we could understand, so that we could appreciate. So Hashem has different spheres and different midas, etc., etc. They're means of interaction with us, and not that for him there's any difference, but that for us there's a difference. The Alter Rebbe brings us back to the mashal we described in Paragimel, if I'm not mistaken, of the light of the sun in the sun, how everything in the world is nullified to Hashem the same way that light that emanates from the sun in its source is nullified to the sun. So the Alter Rebbe says that this scale of comparison we could use to describe another point. Not that the scale of comparison is 100% accurate in all of its facets, but at least for this, the Alter Rebbe says, I'll bring another point out of it, which is that you wouldn't say that the light that's in the sun, which the sun is really a solid mass, it just contains all of the energy that, in theory, could produce the light is shining internally in some way, but you don't say that compared to the sun, the light has different colors. The sun doesn't have colors. There's no concept of colors as far as the light inside the sun, which is completely not revealed. There's no concept of colors for that light. The Alter Rebbe says when we say light has many different colors within it, and you can filter those light through different shades of glasses or whatever you want to use to filter the light, when we say that the light has different colors, it's about the observer. The observer sees different shades of light, whereas the source of the light doesn't see different shades. The source is just the source, and particularly in the case of the sun, where it contains within itself so much that it certainly contains within itself the light, but the light isn't observable. It's almost like the tree falling in the forest, that if a tree falls in the forest, it doesn't make a sound. As far as the source of the light goes, there is no visibility. There's no difference in how it looks. It's just the sun. It's all contained within the sun. But for the observer on Earth, it does actually make a difference. And for the observer on Earth, we can appreciate different aspects of the sun through the light, through what we're able to see about the sun. We know about the sun because we're able to see it. And we know so much about the sun based on the different colors of light that come off of it. The Alter Rebbe references part of Tikkun Zehar, which normally I would say is Tikkun Zehar, why mention it, but it is something that is classically said by many people on Friday afternoons, where the paragraph of Tikkun Zehar goes through all of the spheres, and ultimately it finishes off that Kolel As-Chazah. The whole point of everything that was listed above is so that people should be able to see, so that people should be able to appreciate Hashem. So the reason why we have different spheres, that we say Hashem used Chachma or Hashem used Chesed, is not that there's different spheres by Hashem. It's so that we should be able to appreciate Hashem, because that's really the whole point of the entire creation of the universe, that we should be able to appreciate Hashem. So of course Hashem would, Kaviyachol, invest himself in different spheres. Not that for him there's any difference of if it's Chachma or Chesed, but because for us it's a difference. So that concludes chapter 10. In chapter 11, the Alter Rebbe takes this a step further to something that everyone is familiar with, because instead of it being a more obscure, transmitted statement that you would find in the likes of Sefer Yetzirah or Tikkun Zehar, but the concept of the Asar Ma'amaris, the 10 utterances that it says Mishnah in Mesachos Avos. So you have the concept of the 10 utterances that Hashem used to create the world, the Asar Ma'amaris. The Alter Rebbe says that these Asar Ma'amaris are also loftier than the world. And at the same time, they're completely removed from Hashem, in the same way as Chachma and Chesed, etc. Now, this might cause a person to think, okay, maybe you want to tell me about these 10 attributes of Hashem, and Hashem is loftier than the world, etc., etc. So a person might think, okay, fine, so they're loftier than the world. But the Asar Ma'amaris, the means to which Hashem created the world, how and why would you say that they're different, that they're removed from the world, and so much loftier than it, but it's still like nothing to Hashem? How do you fit in between those two things? So the Alter Rebbe says that really when we say Asar Ma'amaris, 10 utterances of Hashem, what does it mean? It obviously doesn't mean that Hashem, chas v'shalom to say this about Hashem, but that he breathes in through his nostrils, takes a deep breath, and then goes off on a long rant. It's not Asar Ma'amaris. Asar Ma'amaris, says the Alter Rebbe, is an expression of Hashem. And by means of example, when we talk, when we say words, the words are an expression of what we're thinking. What we're thinking is already an expression of our emotions, an expression of what we know and what we feel, brought to our conscious mind in a tangible way, or at least the way that's tangible to our minds. Talking is expressing that in a way that's then accessible to others. So when we say that Hashem spoke 10 utterances, we're not saying that Hashem, chas v'shalom, spoke words like a physical person, chas v'shalom. What we're saying is that Hashem took all of these midas that we've been talking about until now, Chachma and Chesed, and many more midas, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod. Hashem took all of these intellectual ideas, all of these emotions, obviously referring to as we perceive them, because as we said before, Lagabe Hashem, they're all equally nothing. But he took all of these things and he filtered them down in a way that it can be expressed. And when we say expressed, we mean that it can be revealed to us. that it can have a relation to us, the same way that when we say something, the point of a word is that it should be able to be perceived by an other entity. So this is the concept of the Asar Mamaris, and the Asar Mamaris are a revelation of godliness, in the same way that Sfiris and every other attribute of Hashem that you would say, in the same way that all of those are. And one more point that the Alter Rebbe makes, at least for this past week's Tanya, is that we say there's a concept of tzirufi esiyos, of combining the letters that Hashem expresses when He talks. He expresses different letters. He expresses the essential makeup of what His thoughts are. And we say, let's say He says in Dasar Mamari, there should be light. But we have many more things besides for just 10 things that Hashem created. So we say that everything comes off of another level that Hashem said, let's say there should be light, and there should be grass, and there should be all of these things, and everything is in some way an expression of that. So the Alter Rebbe says that these expressions, as they come off of the 22 letters of the Aleph base that Hashem used to actually speak, that you can combine them in different ways and make other expressions for other things to create them, the fact that they're created through these sirufim shows that in a sense, they're more removed from Hashem. But again, this removedness is not removedness vis-a-vis Hashem, because to Hashem, everything is equally nothing. But it shows to us, in our perception, that these things are less involved. The same way that you have Chokhmah is higher, Kaviyachol. When I say Kaviyachol, I mean because I'm referring to Hashem's Chokhmah. So, but Hashem's Chokhmah is higher than the world, and Chesed is lower than it somehow, even though to Hashem, they're both equally nothing. So in the same way, when you have something that wasn't directly said in the Sar Mamaris, it shows that it occupies a lower tier, if you will, in this whole system whereby we see things as being different levels, but by Hashem, everything is equally nothing. All that we should be able to perceive Hashem. So this is Tanya for this past week, and Hashem, next week we're going to be discussing some more aspects of the Sar Mamaris, and if I'm not mistaken, actually making a siyum on Shari Yichud Emunah, moving on to Igeres Hatshuvah. We're looking forward to that.